Hi friends, my name is Danny. If we haven't met, it's great to have you here. And today I am going to be talking about homeschooling young kids with babies and toddlers in the mix. So for reference, I am homeschooling our 4 children, and we're currently pregnant with baby number 5. And we have young kids. So their ages are 7, 5, 3, and 1. This is our 3rd kind of official year of homeschooling. We've done a kindergarten year, which was sort of a homeschool light version, and then 1st grade and now 2nd grade. We live in the Southern Hemisphere, so I'm filming this in August, and it is closing in on, we're on the 2nd half of that 3rd year of homeschooling. We'll finish up the school year in December. And it has been a journey to figure out how to kind of juggle having young kids, babies, toddlers, preschoolers, kindergartners, with having, trying to teach reading, trying to teach, addition and subtraction and multiplication and all of those things. So I want to just talk about 5 steps that I feel have been helpful for me, 5 things that I've done. So tips, steps, however you want to label them, 5 things I've done that have helped me to feel like I am not just drowning in the overwhelm of homeschooling. And there's other things that I do that include more of like household management stuff. So I'm not drowning in a household management situation. Things like kids' chores, our like laundry system, meal planning, even just ways that like we keep our shoes cleaned up. Because we live in a very small house. We have about a 650 square foot cottage that we live in, plus a little extra bonus room that's detached from the building, which is where I am now. And so, because it's quieter than the main house. But those things are not things I'm going to be talking about as much in this video. I have other videos on those, so if you want to, you can go search those out and find that sort of information. This is going to be kind of specifically about the homeschooling side of things and trying to get through academics. So I'm going to dive right in here, after that rather long introduction, and I'm going to give you what the 5 steps are, and then we'll go back through each of them. So step number 1, I have notes over here on my computer, but step number 1 is about our mindset and our attitude when it comes to homeschooling, because ultimately, whether we feel overwhelmed or not actually has to do with our mindset and our attitude. So hold that one and we'll come back around to that. Step number 2 is about structuring a schedule to help you flow through your days. Having some simple structures and routines to just kind of be proactive in how you're working through your days. Step number 3 is about training your kids to have some level of independence in what they do. And obviously, this is not like full-on independence. Like we don't have 18-year-olds. We have a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old. But each one of them in their own way has some age-appropriate, developmentally appropriate, skill-appropriate levels of independence that they can do. And so I'm going to talk about what we do and how we do that. Step number 4 is finding ways to creatively engage / keep your younger kids busy or occupied, or finding ways to incorporate them into what you're doing. So engaging your younger kids, because ultimately when you've got, a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, you're running like kind of a primary schoolroom, elementary age schoolroom. And then like for us with a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, it's sort of like a daycare also. So a child care facility. So if you're in a similar boat, you might feel that tension of like, we've got little kids and then we've got bigger kids and we're trying to balance everybody's needs. And so, yeah, there's a lot going on. So I have some tips for how to engage your younger kids so that you can focus on the older kids, and sometimes how to engage your older kids so you can, not deprive the younger kids of what they need, because little kids have a lot of needs. And then step number 5 is getting and accepting and receiving help. So just a reminder, my reminder more to myself more than anything, that, you don't have to do everything by yourself. So let's go back through those 5 steps, and then each one I'll just give a little bit more detail on. So the mindset piece, couple things that have helped me as I find this on my notes here, couple things that have helped me is remembering that I am pursuing progress over perfection. And I'm pursuing that for myself and for our home management and for our school day and for my kids. And perfection is just such a thief of joy and feeling empowered in the world. And oftentimes it feels like this constant trap of comparison, even if you're just comparing yourself to your own high expectations and standards. So as somebody who at different seasons in my life, I can become a little fixated on, achievement or whatever. And I think you could call it some level of perfectionism. I try to just remind myself really, really regularly that we're going for progress here. This is not about being a perfect mom. This is not about having a perfect homeschool. This is not about having a perfect home. We're just going for progress and movement forward. So progress over perfection. Something else that I think is really, really helpful is to remember the seasonality of this season of life. My baby, my 1-year-old, he's actually 16 months at this point, but my 16-month-old life this month looks a lot different than it did 6 months ago, 8 months ago. He's down to like 1 nap a day, sometimes 2, but as opposed to 8 months ago, it was definitely 2 naps a day. He can walk, he can explore, he's very self-entertained in many ways, versus 8 months ago, it wasn't as much that way. And so if you can remember, like on the hard days, on the hard weeks, man, this feels really, really hard. Well, it might be hard right now, but things are going to shift. They're going to change. You're not going to be stuck in this season forever, for better and for worse. There will be new challenges to come, but there will also be things that get easier as you go. Something else that is helpful for me in this season is, embracing the idea that there's flexibility. We don't do anything in our house on a really rigid schedule or structure. Everything has a bit of flex to it. So embrace that flexibility, embrace the flexibility of a 4-day school week, with 2 days, Friday and Saturday, that you can catch up on things if you need to. Embrace the flexibility of a loop schedule where maybe you do your core stuff, your math and your language arts, every day, but some of your other topics you loop through. You don't have to hit history every single day or science every single day, especially in these younger years. Exposure is important, but you don't need to spend a huge amount of time on every single subject every day. And then the last thing I would say would be, because you're pursuing progress over perfection, because it is a season that you're working with here that will change and there are challenges, because you're working towards flexibility, or you're letting things be flexible, give yourself grace. There's going to be days that it does feel like, wow, things are pretty chaotic, but also recognize, nobody's expecting you to be perfect. You don't have to be perfect. And it is okay to have some days that you're like, well, today wasn't our best day of schoolwork, but that's okay. Tomorrow we're going to try to get back on track. And that's normal. If I was a teacher in a private school, public school for adults and then private school for kids. But I know that not every day in the classroom is like a knock it out of the park learning day. You're just showing up, going through some motions every day, and sometimes it's clicking for kids and sometimes it's not. And you as a teacher are just there to continue to present opportunities for them to learn. But you're also human, and it's okay if you have a day where you're like, you know what, this is not my best teaching day. Ask any teacher towards the end of the school year, in the middle of the standardized testing, or right before a Christmas break, how much actual learning is happening in the classroom. Probably not a ton. A lot of it is just we're just kind of going through some motions, and we already know we're winding down here. We're going to pick it back up when we come back after the break or after summer break or whatever. And in homeschooling, you're going to have some days like that. And that's okay. Just keep going. Keep moving forward. A lot can happen. Your kids can learn a ton with some level of consistency and some level of regularity and some level of going through the motions over a long period of time. It's a little bit of a side tangent there. So, okay, step number 2, scheduling, schedule adjustments. So, I think having a flexible routine that you flow through every day with your young kids. Young kids love routines. And so they thrive on having that structure of knowing what comes next, knowing what they need to do next, knowing what's expected of them next. And how they can contribute and what their job is. And so having a flexible routine that's not necessarily tied to rigid time structures, because at least for me, that begins to feel really overwhelming, but knowing that there's a flow to our days. We get up and then we do our morning chores, and then we eat our breakfast, and then we do our after breakfast chores and clean up and get set up for school. And then we have some read aloud time, and then we have some table bookwork time, and then we have more of a hands-on activity, or more like pile on the couch and read something fun together, or history, or science experiment. And then we're free to go play for a little bit while I'm working on lunch, and then we all have lunch together, and then we have some quiet individual independent play time, quiet rest time for nap time for the baby, and quiet rest time for everybody else, or quiet reading time. And then we have more outdoor play time or collaborative sibling play time. Sorry, my camera it just told me my battery was low, but I'm back. And then we move into our dinner time, getting ready for dinner time and our evening chores. And then we have dinner and family time. And then we do our bedtime after dinner chores, and then our bedtime routine. And then we have family read aloud time. And then it's bedtime. We go to sleep. When kids kind of know that that's going to be the structure and flow of their day, it gives them, I think, a sense of security in like where they fit in things. And obviously some days, you have an activity here, you have an activity there. As my older kids, they're obviously aware of, even my 3-year-old to some degree, he's learning kind of the days of the week. And I'll be like, well, it's Tuesday today. So what do we do on Tuesday? Do you remember? Or it's Thursday today. Is there anything special that we do on Thursday, or is it a normal day for us? And so it kind of gives them that security. Something else that can be really helpful around scheduling, as the routine that I just talked about indicates, I am a big fan of having some middle of the day quiet reset time. I find that when we are all together in our small house for all day long, my kids need a little bit of time away from each other to then be able to come back together and enjoy each other, or play at least collaboratively together. So we have we have nap time for the baby, and at least part of that nap time is when my kids go to separate areas of the house. So I utilize my room, I utilize the kids' room, although a lot of times the baby's asleep in the kids' room. Sometimes we nap him out here in the sleep out with the baby monitor so that it's a little bit quieter for him. If it's sunny and nice, a child will get to go outside in the shaded part of the deck. Somebody can set up blocks in the kitchen for all I care, like just not being visibly able to see each other and having a little bit of separation for 45 minutes or an hour is really, really helpful, both for me to have some kind of lower stimulation time in the middle of the day to sort of reset myself, or have time to focus on tasks that I need to not be as aware, interrupted by, or to have a little bit of rest time myself, read a book, sip a cup of tea, just something to kind of take a little bit of a break. Because as a homeschooling mom, you are on a lot of the day, like from the time the kids wake up until they go to bed, you are oftentimes literally on your feet doing something, or if not on your feet, your brain is working and you are engaging, in teaching and training and communicating with kids. And so yeah, having that little reset time is really, really helpful to avoid feeling just overwhelmed by everything. And lastly, on this scheduling, I think having a bit of a sense of like your day being divided into blocks of time help keep you from feeling like the day's just stretching out ahead of you and it's overwhelming because there's just so much to do. Instead, you can kind of block it and be like, okay, I'm going to focus on these tasks during this time, during this part of our routine, and I'm not going to worry about those other things because that's not what I do during this time block. And there's time in the day to work on those other things at a later point. All right, step number 3, training your kids for some level of independence. So again, I'm not talking about like abandoning your kids for hours at a time or expecting them to do all of their own schoolwork on their own. I feel like that would be just not realistic and also, not what I'm going for as a homeschooling mom. But I do think from a young age, obviously there's going to be something about personality here, but I do think from a young age, we as parents can begin to encourage and help our children build an appetite and an enjoyment of having some level of independence and alone time. Now, again, I'm not talking about abandoning them, but I start this even with my babies. I will, after I breastfeed them, change their diaper, they're kind of happy, squirming around on the floor, on their back, or sometimes when they're I don't usually start a ton of tummy time until they're 6 weeks or whatever, but 4 weeks. But when they're starting to do tummy time and starting to enjoy it, I like to just kind of give them a few minutes alone. Like I'm in the room, but I'm like not engaged in like entertaining them. I might be like, okay, sweetie, I'm going to go, to my baby, like, I'm going to go switch over the laundry load and you'll be able to hear me, but you're good. You're just hanging out here and I'll be back in a minute, and just gradually giving them opportunities to, look around, see the house, look at their hands, chew on their toes, whatever it is they do as a young age. Like, that's good for babies. They get overstimulated too. And so having that time to be able to, 3 minutes here, 5 minutes there, not heaps and heaps of time, but just these little moments to give them a little bit of their own independence. And then as they get gradually older, I like to try to structure my house to give my kids the ability to kind of free roam and explore. Obviously, there's some areas, the bathroom, I like to close off because we have had a lot of things get thrown into the toilet over the years that we've had to dig out. That's just inconvenient. But, like our food storage containers, I don't keep them inside a drawer or behind a cupboard door. I keep them on a shelf in our kitchen. And does this mean that my 1-year-old is dragging food storage containers everywhere in the house? Yes. But also, does that mean that my 1-year-old is very entertained by hauling around food storage containers, finding the lid that fits on the food storage container, putting stuff inside the food storage container, turning them over and stacking them up like a little tower? Yes. And he loves it. And he is so entertained by food storage containers. And so I find that, kind of adapting my house to help facilitate that independence. As my kids get older, this looks like, giving them tasks to do and letting them do it. Like sitting down with my 5-year-old and being like, okay, we're going to go over your sight words here. Your practice reading these 3-letter, consonant, vowel, consonant words. And I'm going to go over the first 3 with you. And then I'm going to have you go over the rest of this row. And then when you've kind of gone through everything, let me know. And then I'll come back and you can practice reading them out loud to me. And just delegating and giving little bits of time for them to focus and do a task on their own, I think can be really, really valuable because it also frees you up to then go change the baby's diaper or go read the directions in the math lesson to the other child or set up some Play-Doh for the 3-year-old. And if everybody has that ability to do a little bit of independence work on their own, then it just makes your life easier. Okay, the other thing that I think is really helpful in this kind of training our kids for independence is delegating tasks to them and actually giving them ownership of those tasks. So, chores, again, like reading things, being like, okay, this is your stuff to read. I'm going to have you work through this, or these are your math problems. I'm going to help you with the first 2. And then I want you to try to do the next 5 on your own. And actually walking away and letting them try it. And for chores, we go through, I have a whole video on how we do our chore system, but this would be a similar thing where I delegate tasks to my kids. I teach them how to do it. I make sure that they know how to do it properly, what the standard of doneness is. And then I release them to be able to do that task. Of course I come back and check on it. Of course it's a learning opportunity. Of course I give him pointers along the way. And of course I don't expect perfection, but the more I can give my kids the ability to know that they're empowered and they're capable, I feel like the more they're excited to take on more and more of that independence. Step number 4, keeping your younger kids busy, creatively engaging with your younger kids. Couple things here. I try to hold on to a morning nap pretty much as long as I can with my youngest, with my toddler, my younger toddler. And even if he doesn't take a nap, sometimes we just do, if I feel like he's kind of getting a bit antsy, we'll put some books and some toys in his porta-cot, which is set up just kind of in like our main room, and then there's a door, and then on the other side of that, I'll leave the door open so he doesn't feel isolated, but he can learn how to have some playtime by himself in a safe designated spot so that we don't have to worry about him, disappearing into a room where we can't see him and we're not entirely sure what he's up to or what he's destroying or unloading or breaking or whatever, because he can't get into a lot of things. So having a designated spot, having the porta-cot, or even like a baby gate where you can kind of contain them into one spot can be really helpful for this. Something else that I've found helpful is to only pull toys out. Not all toys, but just having a few toys that are set aside to come out during school time. So having my 3-year-old, I usually only pull out our train tracks, usually during school time or other special occasion times where I need to, make sure that he's occupied, because he loves the train tracks, but it's best for him to have open space to do that. So oftentimes that's easy to do when I'm working at the table with my girls. He can play in the living room with his train tracks, or he can be in the bedroom with the baby gate up and the baby's out in the main room with us. And he's quite entertained by that. Or pulling out a special book, just having a bit of a rotation where not everything is available all the time helps it be when you pull something out of the closet, suddenly it's like this new exciting thing. Another thing I like to do with my 3-year-old is just include him in what we're doing. So if we're doing, like a dance break video, everybody needs to get some wiggles out, he joins us. If we're doing like measuring something for math, I'll have him help hold the measuring tape. He's my little helper. If my 5-year-old is practicing her reading words and she's like, I put like 3x5 cards down on the floor and she can jump from one to the next and practice reading each word, then I will let him jump behind her. If we're sitting at the table and the girls have their pencils and they're working on handwriting or coloring a picture or something, copying, sketching something, writing a summary, then I will set him up at the table with a coloring book and some crayons or Play-Doh at the end of the table. So he's kind of a part of what we're doing and doesn't feel like he's being excluded. That helps just buy us time to be able to focus on whatever it is we need to focus on without him looking as much for to be entertained or trying to be a distraction. Okay, and step number 5, the getting and accepting help. So sometimes if like in my case, I live a long ways away from family. My mom is super supportive of homeschooling. She homeschooled us, but she lives on another continent from me. And so I can't like rely on my mom or my sisters who also homeschool. Like they're just not part of our daily life. So I'm not able to utilize, family as like childcare or anything like that, as I'm sure many of you are. Like I think that's very common in the world today. And so I have found that, teaching my kids, seeing my kids, having trained my kids to help out with some things, that's hugely beneficial. But also sometimes there's really creative ways that you can, just have a little bit of help in some small area, whether that is an elderly neighbor who is passionate about flowers. And we have a neighbor who has a beautiful garden and lots of flowers. And so, sometimes I'll send my girls over, and she loves company, and it's safe for my kids to walk to her house. And so I'll just send my girls over with she's a nutcracker. So with like some macadamia nuts that need to be cracked or something. And I'll say, hey, could you take these over to the neighbor and, see if she's home and just ask her if she wants to help you crack these nuts and she can enjoy them too. You guys can have a little snack. And it's like a win-win-win for, for the kids. They get out of the house, they get to interact with somebody who's of a different generation. It's a benefit for her. She has a little bit of company. Everybody gets a little bit of a snack. And I get a few minutes of having fewer kids in the house that I can, concentrate and focus on, or who maybe are not going to be as prone towards, arguing or having meltdowns if their older siblings aren't there. And then I can focus on something, quickly for a few minutes. So sometimes it's just like making creative things like that happen. Or we had like a friend of ours who's a stay-at-home mom who had a little guy who was close to about a year, I think, when we were first starting homeschooling. So when I was kindergarten, and I'm teaching my oldest like her letters, like the basics of reading and sounding words out. And it was a bit of a struggle because she wasn't particularly enjoying it. She wasn't catching on quickly. I was probably pushing her too fast, too hard. In hindsight, I probably should have just, let it rest for a little bit, but I was eager to get started. And I had a 1.5-year-old that was not having it with me sitting down to try to teach his oldest sister and a 4-year-old who was getting into everything, and it felt really overwhelming. And I was talking to my friend about this one day, and she was like, you know what? My little guy loves to socialize. Maybe I can come over one day a week and bring my little guy before his morning nap time. So it'll be, relatively early, 8:30 to 10 or something. And we'll come over and I'll just take your 4-year-old and 1.5-year-old, or 3.5-year-old and 1.5-year-old, whatever they were, the not the school age ones, the toddler babies, and we'll just go on a little walk around your yard, or you can go into your room and work with your oldest daughter while I play with them in the living room. And she didn't, her baby schedule changed and things adapted, and we only did it for about, I think, 6 or 8 weeks or so, but that was huge in helping us just get over the hump and feeling like, oh, I have a little bit of support coming in once a week that I know is going to just free me up to be able to give concentrated focus time to this child that needs my attention right now. So sometimes the help comes in creative ways. And sometimes you have to ask. And sometimes if somebody offers, you have to be willing to receive it and not just kind of stick to that, like, I can do everything on my own, which I'm sure none of you deal with, but I sometimes do. So anyhow, those are my tips for how to homeschool young kids, but with babies and toddlers in the mix. Young kids when they need a lot of your attention, they're not as independent as they will be like in high school or even middle school. They're not yet strong readers, but you also have these other young kids underfoot. And in our house, literally, like, we're all in the same very small space. So it is, it's not like every day is perfect. Some days are more up, some days are more down, but I have found that incorporating these 5 different steps does seem to help us at least make progress through our school year, and helps me feel like I'm not just drowning in the overwhelm of the schooling and academics. So I hope it is helpful for you. I would love to hear in the comments below if you have any other tips that you use, or if you have multiple kids in multiple ages, what their ages are. I just love to interact with you guys in the comments. I really appreciate people who comment and give me a chance to kind of comment back if you have any clarifying questions, anything like that. So I would love to hear from you, love to connect down there. Otherwise, I hope you have a great week, and I will have something new for you next week. I hope, hopefully. Okay, have a great one.